Hi, and welcome back to another edition of The Tongue with Dr. Myke. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time here, welcome. If this is not your first time here, welcome back. We've been talking about a couple things in the Bible. We're going to continue the outline today. I'm going to push the tonguespeakslife.com. That is up right now. It's very primitive. Very soon you will be able to leave your comments. You will have all of the newsletters I originally designed. They will be there for you to download. You can read them. You can actually see the format that the newsletter took way back over 10 years ago. But there's a lot of things that will be on there. It's coming. It's almost there. And I have people working on it. JB, thank you. He's doing a lot of behind the scenes work, and you're going to actually meet JB on here. We're going to go through the outline. We're going to discuss a couple things. I'm going to list the outline. We will talk in detail. I will have JB on, and we'll have a discussion about a couple things. So don't get overburdened with this. Go through this outline with me. I'm sure you'll have questions. Keep firing questions at me. We will basically go through this timeline, and then this outline we will break down and talk about each one individual. This is a very brief overview, so hang in there, stick with me. We're going to get far. So why the tongue, right? The Bible's filled with information and thoughts about guidelines, rules, everything about your tongue, right? Tongue has the power of life and death. It can build you up and can tear you down. That's why we chose that platform, actually, The Tongue Speaks Life, because we believe that. I believe that. Proverbs goes on to say, without wood, a fire will go out, and without gossip, quarreling will stop. Something to think about. Also says, your own soul is nourished when you are kind, but you destroy yourself, when you are cruel. And we talked about, you can build people up, you can tear people down. It's everything with what comes out of your mouth, right? Your soul is nourished when you're kind, but you destroy yourself when you are cruel. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called to do, so that you may inherit a blessing. Kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. Straight out of the book, right? So where are we? We're in the Bible. Right now we've been doing most of this out of the Old Testament. The good thing about this is you don't have to know a ton about opening the Bible, where the books are, what the sequence is. It's very loose, and it's very open for you to just walk through and do it on your own. You don't have to have... I recommend not reading it cover to cover. I did that. I don't recommend that, and I'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about my story. But right now we've been in the Old Testament. We're going to go over a book called Esther. So we're in Old Testament. This is 17th book of the Old Testament. This is about Esther. It's a story of a Jewish woman who actually becomes the queen of Persia. And she uses that position to expose a plot to destroy her people, the Jewish people. They foil the plot, and it's the enemies of the Jews who are actually destroyed. Jewish people actually have a festival. It's an annual celebration for this victory, and I'm going to give you some homework there. The name of the festival starts with a P as in Peter. But the first one that shoots that out to me, I'm going to actually give them a call. So take a look, see what that Jewish festival is, find out who Esther is. A very interesting book, very cool story. Right, so as we continue on, we look back at some of the special things that take place, that go on through the month, that go on through the year. We look at the celebrations that honor your parents, your children, Stuff like that goes back to the Greek and Roman times. I mean, I'm Greek and Italian, so I look at the Greek and Roman times. But the modern American tradition is directly descended from mostly Greek and Roman for like Mother's Day. The first Mother's Day we celebrated here was 1908. So by 1914, it was adopted as a national recognized holiday in the USA. And I pray everyone has a great time when they celebrate holidays with their family. Remember, you don't need a national holiday to tell people like your father and your mother how much they mean to you, or to, for your mother, buy them flowers, for your father, go hang out, take them to dinner. You don't need a holiday to tell you to do that. So over the last couple months, I've heard countless stories of people going through hardships, experiencing setback after setback. I mean, in my own life, the setbacks are too numerous to count, and as often as anybody would like to stay away from. This past month seemed like it was one thing after another, and then you hear from friends and family, and they call and tell you, how difficult things have been for them as well. I mean, we're human. We all get frustrated. We get discouraged. That's what happens when life beats you down. Remember, it's at these times that you're tested. And it's how you handle these hard times that shape your character. Being a Christian does not mean you're exempt from hardships, from trials, from obstacles. However, in times of trouble, where do you look? Do you hang your head down, or do you cast your eyes up towards heaven? Sometimes when we're experiencing hard times, it's so that we can draw closer to God. It makes me wonder how many people actually look toward God only in their times of trouble. Yet when good days are upon them, they seem to forget to be thankful. They get distracted. I mean, it happens to everybody, including myself. Remember that God remains in control at all times, in good times and in bad. And the plan for your life continues on exactly how it's meant to. Are you frustrated by setbacks? Yeah, me too. These setbacks will shape your future, trust me. God will close the doors that seem right to you, that they are open, and He'll show you the path to the next door. Does that mean He leaves you on your own way? Absolutely not. Right? So are you constantly asking for His help and direction? Are you spending time in prayer? Do you realize the power of your spoken word, the power of your tongue? The same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead resides in you. There is a spiritual battle that is being fought over you. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. That's found in 2 Corinthians. What has become a stronghold in your life? For we walk in flesh, but do we not war after the flesh? The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. That's found in 2 Corinthians. What has become a stronghold in your life? For we walk in flesh, but we do not war after the flesh. Realize who you are and the power you hold when you speak the written word. The word of God is like a hammer that breaks rocks into pieces. You hold the power over all the strongholds in your life, so speak it out. Right? I've done a lot of messages about that topic alone, and we are going to dive into a lot of this stuff. Trust me, just hang in there. We're going to get through this timeline and where all of this gets connected, right? So we'll just continue on. We started this out in January. We have a bulleted list. We've gone over birth pains, right? Famine, wars, earthquakes, signs to watch for, including rise of powers in certain areas, increase in technology, setting the stage for one world everything, one world power, one world government. Last time we talked about false prophets a little bit. I'm going to mention very, very briefly a book in the Old Testament that talks about the return of one pure language, which is Hebrew, to Israel. But we're going to get into that as well later. So Old Testament, next bullet point we're going to hit is the appearance of the red heifer after 2,000 years. In one of the, I believe it's the first one, I said if you don't know what that is, Google it out, right? So Numbers, book of Numbers, chapter 19, it says, "This is the statute of the law which the Lord has commanded, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, that they bring you an unblemished red heifer, in which is no defect, on which a yoke has never been placed. You shall give it to Eleazar the priest, and it shall be brought outside the camp and be slaughtered in his presence. Next, Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with its finger, and sprinkle some of the blood towards the front of the tent of the meeting 7 times. Then the heifer will be turned to his side, its hide, and its flesh and its blood, and its refuse shall be burned. The priest shall then wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterward come into camp, but the priest shall be unclean until evening." A red heifer will be required to be used in the process of purification described here in the book of Numbers, right? So if we think back over 20 years now, May 1997, the first red heifer was again born after 2,000 years. After that, another one was born in Israel in March in 2002. So what has happened from the span of 2002 to now 2022, right? A lot. We're going to get into it. So, but that's a key element in another check off the timeline, the appearance of the red heifer after 2,000 years. Here it is, 1997, right? Next point is the return of the Ethiopian Jews to Israel, right? So from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my worshippers, my dispersed ones, will bring my offerings. In that day you will feel no shame because of all your deeds by which you have repelled against me. For then I will remove from your midst your proud, exulting ones, and you will never again be haughty on my holy mountain. It's from the book itself, right? So in 1984, Operation Moses takes off and airlifts over 15,000 Jews that have already fled refugees camps in like Sudan, who were there starving. That's one of the operations as returning them back to Israel, right? And in 1991, there was an operation called Solomon, which flew over 20,000 Jews to Israel out of Ethiopia itself, right? I know there was another one at the end of June. That one took, that was like the northeastern Ethiopia back to Israel. So why are all of these Ethiopian Jews going back to Israel? Is it chance? Is it something that is just luck of the draw, or is this what was talked about and what needs to happen before the next thing goes, right? So now the Ethiopian Jews are returning to Israel. The next step is the return of your Russian Jews back to Israel, right? So Bible says, "Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when they will no longer say, as the Lord lives, who brought up the sons of Israel from the land of Egypt, but as the Lord lives, who brought up and led back the descendants of the household of Israel from the northland and from all the countries where I have driven them." So in 1970, I believe it was the early 80s, there was a mass exodus of Russian Jews out of Russia, which was communist. Heavy red zone at the time, right? So the Associated Press reported a dramatic increase in the number of Jewish immigrants from Russia, being the largest number of Russian Jews to Israel since the 1990s. So what has happened since 1990? What has happened since the 1970s and 1980s, where this mass exodus of Russian Jews? Why is everyone going back to Israel? What's happening, right? Are you confused? Does hearing all these facts seem a coincidence? I give the biblical outline of things predicted to happen, and we learn, what has taken place so far. And does that mean I know when the end of the world is? No. We've already talked about that. Nobody does, right? In previous sessions, we talked about God the Father knows. The angels don't know. Jesus doesn't know. No one on earth knows. The Bible does outline what will happen on earth when that time is close, and to be ready for Jesus' return, right? So after discussing all the topics in detail, we're going to go through a review of everything, and we're going to wrap it all together, right? Just like as you look up and you see the gathering of vultures, I mean, you know there's a carcass nearby or something's going to happen. All those signs indicate that something's happening. All these signs indicate the end is near, right? So we are going to get into it for sure. So just stay along. We're almost through it. It's going to raise a lot more questions for you. It's going to bring a lot more thoughts about certain things to you. This is a very brief overview from, like I said, 10 years ago, right? So now, once we do the overview of 10 years ago, we're going to jump into where we're at since this, right? Where are we? How have these things played out? And what's the rest of the list look like? And how many of these things are checked off? What does the chessboard look like? Where are we going? What's happening? Right? We're getting there. Job 22:27. Make thy prayer unto him, and he shall hear thee. Philippians 4:6 says, let your requests be known unto God, and the Lord shall guide thee continually, and satisfy thy soul in drought, and make fat thy bone. And thou shalt be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water, whose waters fail not. Right? So reach out to God. You're confused? You have questions? Are you nervous? Ask God. That's why he's there. It's super simple to close your eyes. Like I said last time, close your eyes and say, God, I'm confused. I'm scared. You know, what does this mean for me? When I opened that book when I said, don't read this cover to cover, I did read it cover to cover, but I grew up in a home where I was taught everything in that book. And I went to church where I was taught everything in that book, right? I also was surrounded by Christians and groups of people that turned me off to things that were written in that book. They were the most judgmental. Some of them were some of the most judgmental people I've ever seen or I've ever met, or did things to me that other people, these people that are supposed to be my family or my brothers and sisters in Christ, did things to me that my real brothers and sisters wouldn't do. You know, it's very confusing. So for me, when I tore that book apart, it was because I was going to tear this apart book by book. And when I read it cover to cover, it was to fill the gaps in on things I heard or stories I heard or some things that didn't make sense. And yeah, it filled the gaps in, but it's very confusing as well. So you need to ask for guidance. You need to find other people that are searching for the same thing, right? There's no shame in questions. There's no stupid questions, and there's no right way or wrong way to go about your journey through this book, right? So when I talk about verses of the month, I have a couple here. There's Exodus is chapter 20 verse 12. Write these down, but check them out later. Ephesians chapter 6 verse 1 through 3. Colossians chapter 3 verse 20. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 6. Back to Ephesians chapter 6 verse 4. So just take Ephesians 6 1 through 4 and Psalm 145. Read all of Psalm 145, right? So a little verse from Proverbs says, listen to your father who gave you life, and don't despise your mother's experience when she is old. So give your parents joy. Make she who gave you birth be happy, right? So like I said before, might not be Mother's Day. Call your mother. Tell your mother that you love her. Call your father. Tell your father you love her. For those of you that your parents are no longer with us, call your friends, call your loved ones, call your family. Tell everybody how important they are to you. Don't let another day go by, because we are not promised one more hour on this earth. Don't take anything for granted. Okay? So we're going to end up here with I'm going to pray again, and remember that if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with the heart that you believe and are justified, and it's with your mouth that you confess and are saved. I pray as we continue this journey together that good seed continues to fall on good ground. Remember that God's word is alive and Christ stands at the door and knocks. Once that door is open, the promise comes true, and the angels in heaven await your decision and cheer. Your name is written on the hand of God, where it is never taken off, and no one can take that away. Your Father loves you. You speak the word and to combat your trials, right? So we bow our heads. Father God, thank you for always hearing us. Thank you for your Son, Jesus, and because of what he did, we can come boldly before the throne of grace. Give guiding light to those who are lost, and use each one of us as a beacon to guide and give strength to others. Let those who are depressed truly feel your presence. Let those who worry find confidence in your word. Shower the weak with strength, and let those who suffer feel your arms around them. Your word says you bestow glory on us to lift up our heads. Let us all understand who we are, where we are going, and show us the path. Let the Holy Spirit move inside all who listen to this podcast and give them a desire to seek your face. In Christ's name, amen. A very special thank you to everybody that's been joining us, and for those of you that are sharing this and forwarding it on. I appreciate that. As this grows more and more, we are going to tackle a couple different things. I am going to pause this very briefly, and I'm going to introduce you to JB, and I'm going to bring him in, and we are going to talk a few things. We're going to get off the timeline for a little bit, but we're going to talk about another topic that we both feel is important for this month. So we will be back shortly. Thank you for everybody that is tuned in. Keep turning in. Keep going. Any questions, please keep the comments coming. Please keep the questions coming, and we're all going to get blessed through this experience. And as I say that, I welcome JB in. So give us 2 minutes and we'll be right back. Welcome back, and thank you for joining me. Like I said before, I have a special guest joining me now. I want to introduce everybody to JB. JB is a great friend of mine. He does a ton of work behind the scenes. He is responsible for getting this podcast out to everybody. He does a ton of work. He's a great person. JB, welcome to the studio, my man.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Great. I asked you on because I have a ton of people asking me a ton of questions. They're scared about going to church. I don't want to say scared. I want to say intimidated, or something at church has turned them off to going to church. There's a lot of questions they have they want answered, and you and I are going to talk about a couple things that pop up. What do you think? I
think that's a great subject. I'm glad that's a surprise to me. I didn't know exactly what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, well, surprise, dude. So it's going to be very laid back. I have a lot of people that talk about what's going on in the world. My podcasts right now are talking about end times. We're going to dig into eschatology a lot throughout the next couple episodes that we work through. But I wanted you on here, and I want you to start hosting with me. We'll have some special guests on. But this is for the laid-back person that has those questions, that doesn't want to formally go and ask, and they may think, hey, this is a stupid question, or hey, I feel dumb for asking this question. That's why we're here, because we're going to answer all that. There are no dumb questions. There are no stupid ways to find things out.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Because when it comes to like church, there's all kinds of churches out there, and they conduct their services very differently. But I think most of the times when people think of church, they think of the very formal services, and they can be
structured, right?
Yeah,
like
and
pomp and circumstance,
and they can be very intimidated by that.
Correct.
And so they might have questions regarding different things, and I love to talk about it. I'll start out real quick by saying that I grew up Catholic, and so I grew up around that very rigid, structured service, and everything was very rigid on how things were conducted. And what happened was I started having a lot of questions in my mid to late teens, and one thing I will say, and we won't obsess too much about denominations on this podcast, but one thing I will say is that Catholic priests in general, and I'm not picking on them, but well, let me just say the Catholic Church in general does not like being questioned, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well, I would say a lot of religions don't like to be questioned. You know what I mean? So Catholic is a lot of ceremony, a lot of. I mean, I grew up my grandparents were Catholic. I went to all the masses. There's a lot of set things that you say and prayers that you say, and so from that standpoint, yeah, I agree that they don't like to be questioned. But I think a lot. I mean, if you grow up and you're in a third world country and all you've ever were told your whole life is this is the way to think, this is the way to think, then you get defensive after somebody questions the way you think.
Oh yeah, absolutely, you know? Yeah.
So, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Yeah, so I had a lot of questions about different things and regarding purgatory, regarding confessions, and why, why people are required to confess to a priest. And there was a couple of different questions I had. I actually submitted them to a pastor in Connecticut somewhere.
What kind of church? What kind of denomination? Was it Catholic?
I believe it was actually an Assembly of God.
Okay.
That the pastor I reached out to. But now when I would ask, when I submitted my questions to the priest of the parish that I went to, they're very I don't want to say smug about it, but they're just very like.
Why are you asking me this?
Well, very short worded about it.
Yeah.
Well, this is we follow tradition, and tradition is very huge in the Catholic Church, which I'm sure you're aware of.
For sure.
And that's how they defend a lot of the things, because when you bring up something like, oh well, this isn't in the Bible, well they basically tell you like, well, tradition and the Bible sit side by side. One is not an authority over the other.
Well, here we're going to talk about, I mean, everything that comes out of my mouth is going to be based on what the Bible is. So when a question comes to me, the first thing I say is, all right, let's look to see what the Bible says about it. All right. And that's where my direction it comes from. And that's my owner's manual in life. And that's where my answers are researched and given. So when somebody asks me that, and we're going to address everything that comes up here, I'm going to go, well, what's the Bible say about it? And we'll look. Fair?
Yeah, I agree. And also, like I stated like a minute ago, like I don't plan on talking about denominations. I for the most part, I think the show would be best if it was denomination free, because we don't want to get all boggled up in like this denomination war. There's way too much division. Let's just keep it Christian. Okay, we're all followers of Christ, and that's really what matters. Anything else is just we're dividing ourselves, and we can't afford that, especially in today's society.
It's interesting because a lot of the religions that I studied going through my program and my history here, a lot of them differ on who Christ is specifically. They all differ on who that man is. Is he the Messiah? Is he the Son of God? And a lot of it is based on just that person, right? So that's where I started with what is about, why is there so much attention and there's so much power on this name, and why is this in other countries and in other places you go to jail for this and you get put to death for this. You don't get put to death for a lot of other things, but a lot of the religions will differ on who Christ was, and we'll talk about that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think to sum up in the shortest answer possible, why is Jesus such a threat to all these different governments, bodies, leaders, or whatever? And I would say, to sum it up in one short answer, would be that he's what's standing between them and total control. Because if people are submitting their allegiance to God, then they're not submitting their allegiance to them, the government power. wherever that government may be.
That's an interesting point. That's a good point. And we'll dive into that, and we'll dive into a lot of things. So this will be a good forum for us to get some things answered.
We'll have all kinds of conversations.
Yeah. So what comes up to me and what we've been tossing back and forth, and a lot of people have been, when they ask me about end times, and this comes out of a spirit of fear and a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty sprouts fear, and fear sprouts crazy reaction. And so let's talk about fear for a little bit. What do you think?
Absolutely.
All right. So what are you scared of? Scared of the dark? Scared of boogeyman?
I'm gonna say I'm not scared of the dark. I'm scared of the unknown.
Things in the dark?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
The dark itself won't hurt you.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about being scared.
Okay.
Right. So would you say the majority of people right now, I'll say the majority of people right now are scared, right? Do you think it's circumstances going on? You think it's they don't know the uncertainty of what's going to happen next? Or do you think they're just, what do you think it is?
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head with the uncertainty part. You have a lot of people who are afraid, yes, and for various reasons. Some people are afraid, they're still afraid of COVID. Then you have a lot of people who are afraid because of what's going on with inflation. The prices are skyrocketing, and the prices are they're showing no sign of slowing up as far as the rising of costs. So yeah, uncertainty. Am I going to be able to afford my house within a year? Am I going to be able to afford to fill my gas tank to get to work and back? It's just there's a lot of uncertainty going on.
Yeah, and uncertainty sprouts fear for sure.
Absolutely.
And fear is a dangerous thing, because if fear takes hold of you, it controls you. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. I mean, with the fear then comes stress, and, a lot of times with stress comes bad habits, of all kinds, whether it be like stress eating, stress drinking, whatever the case is. Sometimes people lean on drugs.
You're looking for that temporary fix.
Yeah,
right.
An escape. Yeah. To try to ease the stress and fear. But the thing is that and the Bible tells us about what? Worrying and not to worry.
Right. It actually says, there's hundreds of verses in the Bible that deal with uncertainty and fear. And if you go just through the book of Psalms itself, here's a couple that'll jump out at you. Take your pen, mark these down, take a look at them. Psalm 23 is probably one of the most popular ones that everyone, that even if they're not religious, have heard at some point. And that is, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Right? That's Psalm 23, 27th. Psalm 27, the Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life, of whom shall I be afraid? Right? So still in Psalms, and you can go through the book yourself, and I encourage you to do that, because it's packed with things that not only will you read once and get something out of it, you'll read it again and get something else. And the more you read it, the more you'll get out of it. Psalm 34, I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Those who took to him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roam in foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. Both in Psalms, right? I'll go back to that in a second, because there's two other verses that I live a lot of my life on that deal with fear. But for me, like when people tell me that they're anxious, or they're scared, or they're depressed, or they are overwhelmed, for me and my religion and my thoughts and my beliefs, all that stuff was overcome on a Calvary, right? So when Christ died on the cross, all of that stuff was overcome, and the victory was claimed over all of that stuff, right? So fear and anxiety and depression and scared and all the things that come with it were all nailed to the cross with Christ, and Christ conquered all of that. And that's why one of my favorite verses in the Bible is John, the book of John, chapter 16, verse 33. And it says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Right? I have overcome the world. That means I've overcome your fear. I've overcome your anxiousness. I've overcome everything that drives you crazy, everything you're looking to fill, every void that you need comfort in. I've overcome, and I've dealt with it. Come to me and I'll give you rest. You agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Years ago, I was at this church service. I think it was for, I hate to say it, but I think it was for a funeral or something. But this one pastor, I didn't normally go to this church. This was a church that my uncle and aunt go to, or at least they used to go to. And the pastor said, 80% of what you worry about doesn't even happen.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's true. And you think about it, like, say you're stressed about, oh no, I might go broke, or I'm not going to be able to afford this, or I'm not going to be able to afford that. And then, all of a sudden you get a job opportunity where you get this job and now you can afford things all of a sudden. Well, I mean, of course that's God blessing you, but it's just that we sometimes worry about so many things. And, that's why you can't worry. It's not healthy to worry. And a lot of times I learned years ago not to stress about things that I can't control. Sometimes it's hard. I have to remind myself. But I try to remind myself that when I was in hard times years ago, very hard times financially, God always made a way for me. I was literally scraping by, and I wound up getting this job opportunity. And I had tons and tons of overtime. And I pulled myself right out of that rut. Now, was the way that God provided for me, was the door that he opened for me, was it easy? No. I worked my butt off, and I was very tired. And at first, I was very stressed out because of the pressure of learning a new job and the pressure of failure not being an option. And that's what I told myself. I said, I have no choice but to get good at this. I have no choice but to succeed, because the only other choice I have is poverty.
Right. So
I pushed myself through it. And it's funny because there was a picture that my mom took, and I think she put it on social media, and it was captioned, Jonathan after a hard day at work. And there I was sitting on the couch with my eyes closed and my hand on my head. But I was that wiped out.
I can relate. I mean, I've been, I've actually been at a point in my life where I had nothing, right? And I was actually at the point where you can see the line of, I have to do something here. So it's either I can't feed myself, I can't take care of myself, I can't pay any of my bills, I don't know where I'm going to eat next, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I have to rob somebody. I got to do something. I saw that line, man.
Yeah.
I've seen the line. A lot of people see that line. And it's like, hey, that's the easy way to do something, or how do I get out of this? And you can get overcome with, you talk about anxious, then you get depressed, and then trying to get out of the depression is another thing altogether.
Yeah, and I think an important thing to note also, it's like that old the joke where the person is stranded on their rooftop because there's a flood and they're waiting on God to save them. Yeah. That old joke. So I'm not going to bother repeating it, but the thing is that when people ask God for help, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have to do any work. It doesn't mean that God's going to do it all for you. If you're say you're having financial hard times financially, don't expect an airdrop of like $1 million. That's not how God works. But what God will do is all of a sudden you might get this job opportunity, maybe this factory that has an abundance of overtime, and some people look at it as, well, this is not the job I want, or I don't want to work a lot of overtime. Guess what? I don't either.
Right.
But it's the fact that it's like when Jesus created the bread and the fish. You know, there's this food that's laid before you. You know,
I wonder how many people were like, "Yeah, I don't like fish."
yeah. You know, you'd be surprised. But you know, it's just like so you have this job, you know, and now you have access to work. You have access to a way to provide for yourself and your family.
Right. And that in itself gets the stress off of you. And, you know, once you're making steps towards things that you need, it makes you feel good inside too. You know, and the book of Matthew talks about worrying. And it says, can any of you, with all of your worrying, add 1 single hour to your life? Not one.
No.
You know?
It sure does a good job of adding gray hairs, though.
Yeah, right. And taking and stealing life from you, you know?
Well, that's all it does. Yeah. Stress does horrible things to the body.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about stress, too, and what, you know, the Bible says about that later. I mean, the book of Luke also says, you know, peace I leave with you, not as the world gives, but as I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. So it deals with your fear, and it deals with peace, but not peace as the world gives. So peace as the world, you know, what do they give? Financial, you know, you rob Peter to pay Paul for a little bit, you know, you feel good because you don't have the creditors calling you and knocking at your door, coming to take your car. You know, I've been there.
Yeah, honestly, I have too, but unfortunately that juggling act only lasts so long.
That's what it is. It's an act, right? And a solution, not a Band-Aid. But, you know, there's a lot of people, and I have a lot of friends that are, you know, even if they on the outside don't seem like they're worried or they seem like they have everything. It's just like that, you know, a duck laying on the water. It looks peaceful on the surface, but their legs are going 600 miles a minute. You know, it's so you never know what somebody's going through, and you never know, you know, what their story is and where they are on their journey. So, you know, and this speaks to, man, we're going to go into like tithing and charity and all that stuff, you know, and on the, we're going to talk about some organizations I'm going to put on the website, like on the tonguespeakslife.com. We're going to put Cure International, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but on my next pod I think we're going to dive into that. But that's a great organization that does surgeries around the world, and check it out, Google it real quick. We are going to once everything is lined up and squared away, we'll have more information for you. What do you think?
I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I never heard of this organization before.
I mean, it's awesome, and it's great people running it, and they're changing kids' lives every day. So people that are born with club foot or something like, just want to feel normal and run like the other kids, you know, this organization makes it happen. So we'll get into that a little bit, but let's go back into fear. So tell me some of your friends. Are they scared?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I guess so. You know, I was just thinking like of my one friend. We're on the same page. You know, like a lot of, you know, before all this, a lot of people would call us conspiracy theorists. But I think more and more now, I think the quote unquote conspiracy theorists aren't being looked at as conspiracy theorists too much anymore.
Right.
Because they're finally starting to realize that, oh crap, this stuff is actually really happening.
Yeah.
But is he afraid? I'm gonna say that he probably experiences the similar anxieties that I do. You know, a lot of my fear, at least right now in the United States, is really just, you know, how the heck am I gonna afford this? You know, because when you're working at a job and basically, you know, if there's limited overtime, you're basically on a fixed income. And when there's no end in sight for rising inflation, yet your income is not changing, that creates big problems. And so I imagine he's probably thinking the same things. But But, just like me, because him and I are very similar, just like me, we don't really express our stress too much.
Not a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And
I think that's another great reason for this show, because we're going to get into all this because and one of the reasons why I'm glad that you're having me on the show is because we can take this show that much further by really getting into some things that a lot of people might not be talking about.
Well, like what? What do you want to talk about?
Oh, just anything and everything with current events, how people feel about what's going on. Like I have a friend, I think I told you before the show, I have a friend that lives in Canada, and she's so stressed out about the regulations, even before this whole convoy thing, just stressed out about how the Canada government is really cracking down on their citizens and their mandates and what they're trying to force their citizens to do, and it's creating a lot of stress in Canada, and that's why what we're seeing in the news. Well, the news isn't really reporting on it much, but what we're seeing in like social media is this boiling over of the citizens in that country, and we haven't reached that point yet in the United States, and I don't know if we will, but
You think we will?
I think we will, but we're not there yet. See, Canada is much further along than we are as far as like their mandates, their requirements, and everything else. They've pushed the people past the point where it's like, okay, we can't do this anymore, and that's what ushered in that convoy.
Yeah, but I mean, what does this convoy really do? I mean, well, some people out there might not know what's going on. So a bunch of truckers drive to Canada, right? Is that the gist of it?
I think that most of them are Canadian. They're
Right.
Canadian drivers that were put out of work.
And so what do they hope to accomplish? They're driving across Canada to do what?
Well,
raise awareness?
Yeah, it's a protest. So, but in the process, they are tying up the streets and they're preventing day-to-day business from being conducted. But it's going to cause a lot of problems. Even
The supply chain alone.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you were to break up this protest and everyone went their way and went home, you still have this major hole in the trucking industry.
Right.
I mean, where are you magically going to be able to replace all these drivers?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, hopefully, not a lot of things like, you get together and you march somewhere. I mean, what are you going to do? The people look out their window. Oh, look, everyone's marching. Cool. I mean, to me, waste of time.
Yeah, I never really understood it myself.
No.
I imagine there's got to be a better way in 2022 to get your point across instead of just standing around.
Yeah.
But, that's just me. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
But I mean, it comes back to the fear. This is the scariest time we've all probably lived through, and we've lived through wars, and we've lived through, terroristic attacks here. But is this scarier than those times? What do you think?
In some respects, it is, and the thing is I don't think we've fully felt, and hardly at all, really, the full impact of what's going on, because the supply chain issue hasn't really affected us yet. So we have thousands of truck drivers that were pulled off the road in Canada, and we're going to have thousands and thousands of more in the United States very shortly, due to mandates that haven't taken effect yet, because I think it's been pushed off. So we're going through the same thing in this country. So now you take all these truck drivers off the road, and now you have all these shipments. You're gonna have docks full of cargo.
Oh, that's happening here.
That have no drivers to take it anywhere.
Yeah.
And we haven't fully experienced that yet. Now, I know at my job, they already put out a memo saying that due to supply chain issues, there could be some down weeks in the near future. So it's
scary times.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I mean,
that affects your pocket.
Absolutely. I mean, there's definitely good reason for people to be concerned.
Yeah.
So it's understandable.
So what do you say to those people that take it to the extreme? And I don't want to say extremists, right? I want to say the people that are like, okay, this is a trial run. They tried to mandate this. To me, it feels like the pressure has eased up a little bit, and there's a lot. The mandate thing is eased up very slightly. There's still restrictions. There's certain cities that are hotspots, right? But there's a difference between Florida and New York. There's a difference between
like
Texas and California, right? But
if someone asked me what's the opposite of New York, I'd probably say Florida at this
right,
point.
Exactly. So, what do you say to those people that are like, that's it, I'm packing all my stuff, I'm going out to the woods, I'm going to live in the woods, off the grid, that's it, I'm done with it? You think we're at that time yet? We think we're at...
you know what? If someone chose to do that, I can't say I'd blame them.
Are we at Red Dawn? Is that where we're at?
No, I don't think we're there quite yet.
All right.
But I think that it's hard to say what's going to happen, because with the whole convoy thing, it really sparked something across the world. I don't know if you've known this or heard about this, but there's a lot of convoys going on around the world. And it all stems from Canada, them inspiring other people to do it. And I think what you're witnessing, like in the United States, with like the ease of regulations and stuff, a lot of, I guess, governors and mayors are lifting certain mandates and certain restrictions, is because they're afraid that it's the same thing's going to happen here.
Yeah.
Like, oh wow, like these people they're pushing back and they're locking things up.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like, I think they're kind of entering panic mode.
Yeah,
maybe we went a little too far here.
The 1,000 ants are going to take over this grasshopper, right? Yeah, I think this is a trial run. I think what's coming next is going to be much more strict and much more, and it's not necessarily. This is painting a picture for end times, and it's painting a picture for one world government where the government tells you what's going to happen. And right now, I think this trial run is hitting a few snags, because there's a lot of people that are like, I'm not ready for that, or I'm not going to take that yet. But guess what? We're that generation. The next generation is being taught, hey, you're being told what's good for you for your own good.
Yeah.
Once they bleed this generation out, I'm worried. The next generation is much more programmable, I'll say.
Yeah, I watched this video one time where they were explaining like the demoralization of the citizens through the education system.
Right.
And basically, teaching kids to basically be slaves. Right. To accept what they're told. Critical thinking is like not even really a thing anymore. And that's one of the biggest problems of what's going on today, is because people watch, like, say for example, they watch the news and they just automatically accept it as fact without even like thinking about or processing what they just heard. Right.
Well, that's scary.
Well, yeah, because then it just goes back to like the days of Hitler, where what they told you, because obviously there was no internet back then, so you couldn't really do your own research. What you heard was what you just accepted as fact. But now we live in an age where you can find things out by poking around a little bit. But if you just hear or see something and you don't stop and say, well, I don't know, that sounds kind of strange to me, maybe I should look into this a little more. And then all of a sudden you discover things, and you discover documents and information, and then you formulate your own opinion on something. And it's like we're losing that, in the younger generations. There's less questioning, and what did Paul say? Didn't he encourage people question Question
What do you
him.
mean?
You know, question.
Yeah.
Question the script.
Well,
put
I
the
mean,
scriptures.
everybody at some point is going to question what they're being told, or they should anyway. I mean, what's gonna? I mean, that's how it happened for me. Is I'm told something and told something and told something over and over. At one point, you're like, really? What if, man? What if that's not true? What if, and then you're looked at like you're crazy. But, it's just like, there's an old story about, free ranging sheep. And forgive me if I get this wrong, but if you slowly start moving a section of a fence every week closer and closer to these sheep and gather them in, before you know it, they'll be surrounded and locked in and won't even realize it. So it's the same thing with your freedoms. You slowly take one away and one away, and you bleed out this generation, and the younger generation doesn't know that freedom already, and are being told we took that away because it wasn't good for you. They don't know what that freedom's like, right? So they just, okay, yeah, must not have been good, so they took it away.
Yeah, and they were actually succeeding at it.
Right.
There was a podcaster I was listening to. He was actually talking about the same exact thing that you were just talking about, and the government for years was actually getting away with this because they were chipping away little by little. Right. They had what they called, you probably heard about this, it's called the 16-year plan.
Yeah.
And so within 16 years, I think we were going to be where we're right now. We would be pretty much in a communistic third world country. But their whole plan got screwed up because when Trump got elected, he reversed a lot of the things that Obama and Bush put in place. He was reversing it like crazy. During Trump's presidency, he was working like a madman behind the scenes, reversing a lot of this stuff. So he was basically a monkey wrench in this 16-year plan. Mm. So what's going on right now, when Biden took office, he was feverishly, well, I don't know if he was, but whoever's working with him, feverishly reversing the stuff that Trump reversed, right, putting it back in place. But the problem was it fast-forwarded everything. We noticed it. We noticed the gates moving in on us.
For sure.
Whereas we didn't notice it over a year's span.
Right.
So they kind of like the whole New World Order movement, or whatever you want to call it, I guess a great reset. They're now talking about this publicly. Crazy as it is, they're talking about this publicly now.
And New World Order, they're already talking about that.
So now they're biting themselves they're kicking themselves in the you know what, because they're fast forwarding. Everything's in fast forward motion now. So we're seeing it. We're seeing it happen right before our eyes.
Right.
We're seeing the gates closing on us.
Right. And it doesn't matter who you voted for. Well, that's not what we're talking about.
No, this is not political at all.
No, not at all. But I mean, I don't think we're far from, and the people in the other countries, when it happened to them, is getting woken up in the middle of the night and being told, hey, are you vaccinated? No, get on this, in this line. And now you're being transported away for your own safety, or to, and you're bussed out or trained out to some enclosed campment where who knows what happens, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we're far.
No, I mean, and yeah, I wasn't trying to get political at all. The point I was making was, because you made the reference about the sheep and the gates.
For sure.
And the thing is that, so for many, many years now, this could have been over the course of 50 years, they've been slowly closing that gate on us.
Yeah.
And everything got goofed up when Trump entered office, because before that, we were going to get to that point, and we would not have noticed it. We weren't noticing it. Mm. I mean, we would get ticked off about things like, oh, well, freaking government, like this and then that, and this tax and that tax. But it was happening at such a slow rate that you just kind of like, you griped about it and you accepted it. But with everything happening so fast, it's like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah. We're trying to catch up again.
And now that's why you have what's going on now. That's why you have this boiling point.
Right. And what's that do? That brings out tons of fear. And that's where we're at. A lot of people are scared. A lot of people writing in, talking about, should I be scared? What's going on? And the Bible, just to wrap this up, because we're running out of time here, 2 Timothy says, For God has not given us a spirit of fear. The end.
Amen.
It hasn't given us a spirit
That's
of fear.
right.
Power, it's power, love, and a sound mind. So keep your mind clear, transform your mind, renew it with your thinking every day. But you have not been given a spirit of fear. So conquer your fear. It's quick prayers to God. God, I need help. God, I'm scared. Help me. Right? That's it. Simple. JB, thank you for coming on.
God is not the author of fear.
No, for sure. Right. And we're going to talk about stuff. But thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
JB will be back for sure, 100% on many different things. Keep your questions and comments and things coming in. We will address them more laid back and more at ease, right?
Absolutely.
A little easy conversation. And most importantly, don't be scared. All right? Even if it's a scary time. You stand up, you be that beacon of light. Right? And thank you for listening to us, and we'll be back. Thank you.